On the 22nd of September, 2025, the world gasped. In Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré stood before his ministers and the nation. His announcement was not policy as usual. It was defiance, a direct strike at the chains that had bound his country for decades. He declared that the future of his people would no longer be tied to convoys of diesel or the dictates of foreign capitals. And in that moment, he introduced a man, a name whispered with both ridicule and awe. Maxwell Chikumbutso, the controversial Zimbabwean inventor who claimed to turn invisible radio waves into boundless energy. The promise was staggering. Imagine hospitals where the lights never die, classrooms where children learn beneath steady beams, soldiers defending their nation without fear of fuel shortages. But the question thundered louder than the announcement itself. Was this a genius leap that could free 600 million Africans still living in darkness? Or was it a reckless gamble that could crush an entire nation under the weight of disappointment? Stay with us. Subscribe, because this is not just a story of Burkina Faso. It is the battle between light and darkness, between dependence and freedom. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation in the heart of West Africa. Its earth is rich, its people resilient. Yet for generations, its destiny has been chained to one weakness: fuel. More than 80% of the nation's energy comes from imported diesel and petroleum. Each time a border closed or a convoy was halted, silence fell upon the land. Hospitals lost power, classrooms went dark, military posts sat paralyzed, generators ran dry. In the flicker of dying light, sovereignty itself seemed conditional. For decades, this dependence was not accidental. It was the product of a world order defined elsewhere, in Paris, in Washington, in Brussels. International lenders dictated terms, oil companies extracted profit, and every shortage became a reminder that Burkina Faso's independence was never complete. It was a nation shackled not by chains of iron, but by pipelines of diesel. On that September day in 2025, the breaking point arrived. Standing before his ministers, President Ibrahim Traoré's voice thundered with the weight of history. We cannot continue to live like this. Our hospitals cannot beg for diesel. Our children cannot study by candlelight. Our soldiers cannot defend a nation paralyzed by fuel shortages. We must find a path beyond the frameworks that bind us. His words carried more than frustration. They carried defiance. To an American ear, they echoed Truman unveiling the Marshall Plan, or Kennedy daring to send a man to the moon. But these were not the words of Washington or Paris. They were spoken in Ouagadougou. They were spoken in Africa. That very evening, Traoré's government revealed its boldest step yet, an agreement with Maxwell Chikumbutso, a Zimbabwean inventor, long scorned by Western academia, but hailed by some as a visionary. Maxwell claimed that he could harness the invisible radio frequencies that saturate the air and convert them into endless energy. For many, his story was already legendary. Born in Harar, raised in poverty, he dropped out of school at 14. In a small garage filled with discarded radios and broken wires, he began to tinker. By the time other young men sought jobs, Maxwell claimed he had built machines that defied the boundaries of accepted science. He spoke of a self-charging electric vehicle that could run for thousands of miles without ever plugging in, powered by what he called a micro-energy device. He unveiled prototypes of compact generators, no larger than a suitcase, that could power an entire home or even a military outpost without a drop of fuel. He even spoke of drones and radar systems running 5 times longer than those on lithium batteries, and a television that drew its power from the very air. Scientists abroad dismissed him. Journals refused to publish him. Laboratories laughed at him. Fantasy, they said. Impossible, they scoffed. But in Ouagadougou, Maxwell represented not fantasy but possibility. He represented not a trick but a chance. A chance to break the chains of diesel and dependency. A chance to give light to 600 million Africans still living in darkness. On the night of September 23rd, in the underground bunker of the presidential palace, the gamble was put to the test. Generals gathered. Ministers watched in silence. On the table stood a compact device, its casing plain, its size no greater than a traveler's bag. A single green light blinked on its surface. Maxwell's hand hovered above the switch. He pressed it. At first, nothing. Silence thickened the room. Suspicion tightened faces. Then, within 30 seconds, a transformation. Overhead bulbs blazed to life. Consoles glowed. Screens flickered. The cold chamber became warm with light. One general whispered, almost in disbelief, "To do this with diesel, we would need at least 25 liters every hour." The room fell into awe. Some faces showed wonder, others suspicion. Was this the birth of a revolution, or the performance of a trick too dangerous to trust? Then came the words that cut deeper than the light itself. President Traoré's voice rang across the chamber. "If we master this technology, Africa will never kneel again. Not to oil, not to the IMF, not to the chains of dependency." In that moment, the choice was made. Burkina Faso would not beg. Burkina Faso would dare. And yet, beyond those concrete walls, a question still lingered like a storm on the horizon. Was this the dawn of liberation, or the first step into a perilous illusion? The bunker demonstration did not remain a secret. By dawn, whispers had already escaped the palace walls. Headlines blazed across African radio, European networks, and American news feeds. Burkina Faso tests infinite energy generator. In Ouagadougou, the announcement struck like thunder. Mothers imagined hospitals where incubators never shut down. Teachers pictured classrooms alive with steady light, no longer dimmed by candle smoke. Farmers saw silos powered to preserve their harvest, grain no longer rotting in the heat. For the ordinary citizen, the dream was almost biblical, light without fuel. But dreams in one corner of the world are often fears in another. In Washington, in Paris, in Brussels, the news was received not with wonder but with alarm. For 70 years, the global order had rested on two foundations: military might and energy control. America guarded shipping lanes, dictated oil routes, and through the IMF and World Bank tied developing nations to cycles of loans and dependency. Now, a landlocked country in West Africa dared to declare independence from all of it. Emergency meetings erupted. Intelligence chiefs pored over every scrap of information. Was Maxwell a fraud? Or worse, was he real? A commentator in the United States thundered, "If Africa breaks away from the orbit of the G7, the 70-year order will collapse." Markets move faster than politicians. Brent crude prices plunged 20% in a single day. Stocks in Tesla, Panasonic, and other giants shed $150 billion in value. Investors fled fossil fuels. And across Africa, social media swelled with a single refrain: "Hope has arrived." Yet hope for some meant fear for others. Economists within Burkina Faso warned of ruin if the gamble failed. Opposition leaders went on state radio declaring, "If this experiment collapses, we will be isolated, mocked abroad, and poorer than before." Even within the military, suspicion lingered. Some officers feared that daring to challenge global energy powers was not bravery, but suicide, an open invitation for sabotage. Beyond Burkina Faso's borders, reactions fractured the continent. Mali, Guinea, Niger, nations equally weary of foreign dictates, voiced support. Regional editorials hailed Ibrahim Traoré as a new Mandela for the energy age. There was even talk of a pan-African energy alliance, with Ouagadougou as its capital. In Europe, the tone was harsher. French commentators dismissed the project as an illusion that threatened West African stability. In Brussels, leaders muttered about grave consequences. But in quiet conversations, ordinary Europeans struggling with soaring energy bills whispered a dangerous thought: what if this technology could reach us too? In Moscow, state television praised Traoré as the bold young lion daring to defy the West. Russian strategists began calculating how free African power could undermine OPEC and redraw markets. In Beijing, the tone was pragmatic. Chinese envoys approached Ouagadougou with offers: factories, infrastructure, trade routes, partnership if Burkina Faso aligned with their vision of a belt and road across Africa. The IMF and World Bank, however, saw an existential threat. Their leverage had always rested on scarcity, on nations needing loans to keep lights on, fuel moving, economies alive. If Maxwell's device truly worked, their model of power would collapse overnight. The fracture lines deepened when a shadowy drama unfolded. Agents whispered into Maxwell's ear. Reports surfaced of offers, astronomical offers, $20 billion for his patents, a sum equal to Burkina Faso's entire GDP. All he had to do was sign and walk away. But with Ibrahim Traoré at his side, Maxwell refused. His words were defiant. "This is not for sale. This is Africa's freedom." That refusal drew a line in the sand. No longer was this about engineering, or economics, or even science. It was about sovereignty. Could a continent long exploited for its resources finally hold something of its own? But destiny is never uncontested. On the very night of Maxwell's refusal, fire tore through one of Ouagadougou's laboratories. The explosion ripped across the city, shattering windows, consuming prototypes, burning fragile research to ash. For many, it was confirmation that powerful forces would not allow this vision to advance unchallenged. Was it sabotage? Was it failure? Was it proof that the dream was too fragile to hold? The smoke rose above Ouagadougou, and the world held its breath, for in that instant, the promise of freedom became entangled with the shadow of destruction. And the question thundered louder than ever: was this the dawn of Africa's liberation, or the beginning of its undoing? When the flames devoured the Ouagadougou laboratory, the air itself seemed to crackle with uncertainty. Prototypes melted into twisted metal. Research notes, fragile and irreplaceable, turned to ash. The nation that only hours before dreamed of light now woke beneath smoke. Some whispered it was sabotage. Others claimed it was proof of fraud. To the skeptic, the explosion was the end of the illusion. To the faithful, it was the beginning of the battle. Maxwell himself was pulled from the rubble, hands burned, body shaken, but spirit unbroken. Standing before cameras, his voice rasped, yet resolute. "You can destroy our laboratories, but you cannot destroy an idea whose time has come." Those words traveled farther than the flames. In the villages of Burkina Faso, where kerosene lamps flickered in huts, people lifted their phones, sharing the image of Maxwell bandaged yet defiant. For them, it was not science under trial. It was dignity itself. And then came the symbol that burned brighter than any explosion. Deep beneath the presidential palace, in the same bunker that had stunned generals days before, the compact generator still hummed. While laboratories collapsed in fire, the little suitcase-sized device continued to shine, casting its soft green glow across a map of Africa pinned to the wall. Cameras captured the moment. President Ibrahim Traoré stood beside Maxwell, his hand resting firmly on the metal table, his gaze fixed on that glowing map. Within hours, the image flooded across the continent. Caption spread, "Africa will not kneel." The energy of freedom. Light against darkness. For the common people, the symbolism was irresistible. The machine had become more than wires and circuits. It was a torch passed from one generation to the next. It whispered of hospitals that would no longer fall dark, of classrooms that would not flicker out, of farms no longer bound by rotting harvests. Yet not everyone shared the faith. Economists raised alarms. If the technology fails, they warned, Burkina Faso will be left bankrupt, isolated, mocked. Opposition leaders fanned the flames of doubt, accusing the president of gambling the nation's future on a fantasy. Even some in the military whispered that Burkina Faso had painted a target on its back, daring powers far greater than itself to strike. But within Traoré's inner circle, the conviction hardened. To continue on diesel was not survival, it was a slow death. To gamble on Maxwell's vision was at least a chance at life. Internationally, the fracture widened. In Washington, whispers turned into classified warnings. Analysts at the Pentagon wrote of a potential energy revolution that could destabilize 70 years of global order. In Paris, outrage hardened into strategy. In Beijing, calculations shifted to opportunity. And in Moscow, voices grew louder, praising Traoré as the bold young lion defying the West. The explosion did not end the movement. It magnified it. For in every photo of the rubble, there was also the image of the glowing generator. To some, the fire was proof of sabotage. To others, proof of instability. But to millions across Africa, the glow was enough. And so the divide deepened. Was this truly the start of liberation, or merely the theater of illusions? Was it sovereignty, or self-destruction? Was it the seed of freedom, or the spark of conflict? Burkina Faso had become more than a country. It had become a question, a mirror held up to the world. And that question demanded an answer not only from Africa, but from America, from Europe, from every nation tied to the old order of oil and loans. And now I ask you, was the explosion the end of a dream, or the first shot fired in a new kind of war? Tell me, in your heart, do you believe Burkina Faso was betrayed by unseen hands or undone by its own ambition? In Washington, the explosion was not seen as a local tragedy. It was filed as a national security alarm. Intelligence analysts labored through the night, dissecting satellite images, intercepted calls, and eyewitness accounts. The question was stark. Was Maxwell a fraud, or was he real? If real, then America's supremacy, the supremacy that had rested for 70 years upon energy routes, oil alliances, and financial leverage, was trembling. To older Americans who remembered the Cold War, the echoes were haunting. In the 1950s, it was the Soviet bomb. In the 1960s, it was the race to the moon. And now, in the 2020s, could it be that a small, landlocked country in Africa had stumbled upon the next great shift, one the West did not control? The choices before Washington were bitter. Should the United States attempt partnership, risking the appearance of legitimizing unproven science? Should it discredit Traoré, branding him a reckless dreamer? Or should it prepare, quietly, cautiously, for the possibility that Africa might leap beyond oil and lithium, beyond the very foundations of Western industry? In Moscow, the calculation was different. Russian media praised Traoré as the young lion. Energy strategists whispered that Africa's rise could fracture OPEC markets and weaken America's grip. To Moscow, every flicker of light in Ouagadougou was a shadow cast against Western dominance. In Beijing, the tone was pragmatic, not poetic. Chinese envoys arrived with offers: factories, roads, markets, if Burkina Faso aligned itself with their Belt and Road vision. For Beijing, independence was not a threat. It was an opportunity to pry Africa away from the G7 orbit. Europe, however, was paralyzed. Brussels feared instability. Paris, humiliated by the defiance of its former colony, thundered warnings of grave consequences. Yet ordinary Europeans, weary of high energy bills, could not help but whisper, what if this miracle was real? What if it could reach us? International lenders saw their authority threatened most of all. The IMF and World Bank, institutions built on scarcity, understood the danger. For if villages could light their homes without diesel, if nations could run without loans, their leverage would dissolve like mist before the morning sun. And so, from Washington to Moscow, from Beijing to Paris, the world leaned forward. No one dismissed Burkina Faso anymore. Some saw salvation, some saw disruption, but all recognized one truth. If Maxwell's generator proved real, then the 21st century's balance of power would be rewritten. And the question that haunted every capital was this: could a suitcase-sized box in Ouagadougou truly topple the pillars of global order? Or would unseen hands ensure that Africa's light never reached the world? Burkina Faso now stood at a crossroads. One path led back to the familiar chains. Diesel convoys crawling across borders, loans signed in faraway boardrooms, the old dependency dressed in new clothes. The other path was uncharted, lit only by the faint green glow of a suitcase-sized generator in a concrete bunker. For President Ibrahim Traoré, the choice was clear. He spoke not of retreat, but of destiny. To him, Maxwell's device was more than an invention. It was a declaration that Africa would no longer beg for permission to exist. To his supporters, the risk was worth it. To his critics, the gamble was madness. And yet, beneath the debate, a deeper truth stirred. 600 million Africans still live without electricity. To them, the promise of power from the air is not a question of science, but of survival. It means children studying beneath steady light. It means mothers watching incubators hum through the night. It means farmers storing grain for tomorrow instead of watching it rot today. The world, however, is not a passive witness. Already forces align. Some offer partnership, others plot sabotage. Some whisper of alliances, others of intervention. What began as an experiment in a bunker has become a battlefield where economics, politics, and destiny collide. History offers echoes. When Truman announced the Marshall Plan, the West was rebuilt. When Kennedy vowed to reach the moon, America touched the stars. Now Traoré dares to declare that Africa will master energy drawn from the invisible air. The world may scoff, or it may fear, but the people of Burkina Faso hear only one sound, the hum of possibility. And so the question lingers, pressing upon every mind. Will this path carry Africa into freedom or drag it into fire? Will the small hum of that generator become a roar heard across continents, or will it be silenced before it grows? The truth is simple. The world has changed. The only uncertainty is this: who will hold the light when it finally breaks through the darkness? Burkina Faso dared to dream. The dream was scarred by flames, mocked by skeptics, and threatened by powers far greater than itself. Yet the vision endures. In that underground chamber, Ibrahim Traoré and Maxwell Chikumbutso stood shoulder to shoulder, declaring that Africa's destiny would not be written in oil contracts or dictated by foreign banks. It would be written by its own people, in its own light. The image of the glowing generator is more than a photograph. It is a promise that the 600 million Africans still waiting for electricity may one day live with light. It is a warning that the old order built upon scarcity and dependency can collapse the moment the powerless discover new strength. And so the story stretches beyond Ouagadougou. It reaches into every village where lamps still burn kerosene, every classroom where students strain by candlelight, every hospital where doctors fear the power may die mid-surgery. It reaches, too, into boardrooms in Washington, Paris, Beijing, and Moscow, where men of power ask themselves whether this light must be crushed before it spreads. The question is not only for Africa, it is for America as well. Should Americans see in Ibrahim Traoré a partner for progress or a challenge to the stability we have known for 70 years? Should we stand with the hope of a rising continent or cling to the chains of an order that has already begun to crumble? History always turns on moments like this, and history will remember what side we chose. Now I ask you, do you believe that Burkina Faso's courage and Maxwell Chikumbutso's vision are the keys to Africa's awakening? Or will the world extinguish their light before it has the chance to shine? If you feel the courage of Traoré stirs something in your heart, then share this story. Leave your voice in the comments below. Tell us, would you risk everything for freedom or surrender safety for chains? And above all, subscribe. Subscribe because truth matters more than headlines. Subscribe because this channel will follow the struggle until the very end. For this is more than one story. It is the beginning of a movement, a call to awaken. The time has come for light against darkness, for freedom against dependence, for hope to rise where none was expected. This is Africa's hour. These are not just 3 projects of science. They are projects of destiny. And they begin here,